Andy Goram, what a night that was. Don't forget that. And that was one of the most incredible nights. I hope you've got time for us to talk about this, because Frank was front and centre. It was a rare time I'd seen Frank being 100% deadly serious about something. And what had happened was, when old Andy Goram was in his road out, everybody knew he was dying. He was in the St Andrews Hospice for his final weeks. So between the fact he was in the St Andrews Hospice, he had also been, as some folk would forget, an ex-Motherwell player, right? And I had known, like Frank, done a bit of after-dinner speaking, so I'd got to know Andy as well through that way. The convener of the Airdrie Working Man's Club in the same town as the hospice, Bobby, he said to me, what about you fancy putting on a night or something for Andy Goram? And I might talk to Frank about it in the time. And we knew as well that Andy didn't have any money. His past story's been well documented. So we decided if we could do a wee night for Andy, we'd split it between the money, the proceeds between the St Andrews Hospice, Cancer UK, and the Goram family. Money for the funeral, basically, you know what I mean? So what we thought was just going to be a wee nice night, a wee bit reverential, and I look back talking about Andy, who was up in the hospice, but we don't know of any sign of him. The tickets sold out in like 20 minutes, right? Like 380 folk rammed into the Airdrie Workmen's Club. Frank had been brilliant help we get in. He got a lot of the Celtic guys in that era, guys that had played against Andy Goram, right? And then we got a lot of the boys that had played with Andy Goram, going back, and Colin Hendry and guys like that, you know. And there wasn't one of them that said, I can't make it, right? The only guy I think in mind was John Bomber Brown, and he was gutted he couldn't make it. He was in holiday, right? So that's fair enough, right? So all the rest of the guys were there. And I'd said to Frank, I'd said to Andy, I'd been in told with him in the text. I know.
I've seen him coming.
Aye, I know, it's amazing. Because I thought, in the run up to him saying, Andy, we're doing this. Oh, that's awfully good day, Tam, and that's great. Say hello to all the boys. And I said, no, don't be daft. I says, but you know, it'd be really nice, Andy. I says, text me even just a few words, and I'll read it. And I thought, that'll have a bit of impact on the night. If I say, now, before we get any further, we got a message for Andy. He's up there in the hospice. Bear in mind, he died 9 days later after this event, right? Which is why I'm coming to the most amazing. But so he hadn't get back to me. A couple of texts back, and then a gap, and I'm thinking the man's in his road out, you know. Next thing Frank says to me, the day of the event, Andy's going to come down to the club, and I said, what? He said, aye, he's determined he's going to come down. He says, we're going to get him on the big built-up wheelchair, proper big job. We'll get him in the back of one of the taxis with the sliding doors. And Frank says, me and his boy, Danny, we'll bring him down. So this is where I say, Frank, who gets lampooned many a time, I'd never seen Frank as serious. He said to me, you'll maybe remember this, he says, you can't have anybody, Tam, with their phone out. He doesn't want to be remembered like us, right?
And I thought, you can, if anybody said to Tam, say to him, if you love Andy, get a phone.
Aye. And I had no idea what to expect, right? So, even when we were starting for 7:30, I'd planned with Frank then, there's the swing doors with the wee glass windows as you come into the main hall. When I see you there, when you give me the thumbs up, then I'll get into welcome and in, right? And there's a bit of me as well. I was going like saying, I've got no idea what this guy's going to look like. I know he's very, very ill. And you remember always with sportsmen, you can only ever remember them in their prime, and you know. So, I stood up in the crowd. We had about 6 or 7 of the Rangers guys there, 6 or 7 of the Celtic. That was going to be part of the Q&A. That was it on the night. And I said, right, well, ladies and gentlemen, at this point I thought I was going to maybe read out a wee message for Andy, as you know, he's up in the hospice. I says, but remarkably, Frank, who he'd never been away from up in the hospice, up every day, I says, incredibly, you're not going to believe this, I says, Frank and his boy Danny has managed to get Andy down here tonight. There's already wee audible gasps, right? I'm up on the stage. I says, listen, one thing, ladies and gentlemen, phones away. So we're going to bring Andy in. He's not in great shape. He's not wanting to be remembered as the man that you're going to see tonight, right? And so everybody concurred, you know, that was it. And the phones were away. And I said, so ladies and gentlemen, big build up. Andy Goram, Frank and Danny brought him in. And I'll see this the rest of my life. I'm up in the high stage like any workman's club. 380 folk all out there. So they immediately rise and they're all clapping and cheering and whistling, right? As Andy's getting wheeled in. But because they're all standing up and he's getting wheeled in, they can't actually see him. But I can see him. Just and he's I can see it like it was yesterday. And he was awaiting on, wasn't he? He must, he must have been doing it, I think, about 5.5 stone. He was awaiting on and very skeletal and oh God. And he came in. So he stopped Frank and Andy's boy stopped the wheelchair down in front of me. I'm high up on the stage, audience right there. And then Andy looks up and he goes like that, as if gesticulating to get me up. So I think it must have been, glad they were there, sizing them. Big Marvin Andrews and Cowan Hendry, they went up, take an edge each of the wheelchair, right? Lifted it onto the stage. So he's in front of me, so I'm behind Andy Goram, and he's facing out for the stage and all the audience are there. And I'm watching the audience. The minute they saw him, when he was up, tears.
Yeah, wow.
Not just the women, and there was loads of women there that night. But guys, everything, dabbing their eyes and all that when they saw him. It was just shocking. And then
remember he started speaking.
Aye.
I'm going, you're not getting paid for this.
Aye. Because you know what, that's a lighter, but that was great because I went down when they were all still cheering and greeting and everything. I just went down, I says, what, do you want to say thank you or anything? Do you want to speak, you know? And he says, oh yeah. So again, he went into, I can still see what he was wearing. He went into his pocket of shirt, took out a wee pair of reading glasses, perched them on the end of his nose. He went in here and he took out a script, notes, right? And then I held the mic at the start, but he took it off me, right, when he was comfy. And then you could have heard the pin drop, right? And in quite a remarkably strong voice, he started talking. Well, the minute he mentioned any of these guys, or Rangers, Celtic, Peter Grant was in bits. Now, you ask any guys, or you ask half-wits to take Football too seriously, and they'd imagine that they were sworn enemies, Andy Goram and Peter Grant, that year, in it, right? Yeah. Peter Grant was, oh dear, what a state he was in. Charlie Miller, who clearly adored them, right? They're on absolute bits. And Peter Grant could do every few minutes, he's come up and just hugging him and all, you know? Simon Donny. And it was incredible. And at the end of it, Frank's right, he must have done 9 days before he passed away, very weak. He must have done about half an hour. And we did say that as a joke at the end. So I hope you're not wanting £500 for it, right? And he's laughing at that. But then his best line, the one that I'll remember, and I had to repeat it to the audience, by way of an introduction, when I knew then that Frank had got Andy down, I said, it's one of his wee stats that I always chuck out from time to time. I said, ladies and gentlemen, the most amazing thing about Andy Goram, I says, I remember seeing him in October 2000, Motherwell versus Aberdeen at Firth Park. I says, Andy Goram was in goals for Motherwell. Jim Leighton was in goals for Aberdeen. 134 caps between them, and the final score was 6-5 to Aberdeen. And I says, pound for pound, when have two goalies collectively with that number of caps conceded 11 goals between them? I says, it must be a world record, right? And so I told him that, right? And then did it, and here he is, wow. And Andy Goram went, right? So at the end of that, because he'd been listening outside, at the end of it, they got him back down onto the flare, and Andy, he waved, and he gave me a wee hug. He says, thanks for doing all that, you know. And I says, oh, don't be daft. And then he says, I'll tell you what, Tam, he says, even now, I look fucking better than Jim Leighton.
I remember
and
that.
those were the last words that Andy Goram said to me. Brilliant. And just absolutely brilliant. But it's just incredibly it was 9 days later.
Yeah. I went up with Ruffy a couple of times, and Ruffy's, you know what Ruffy's like.
Okay, he can't stop himself.
Andy was sleeping, he kept waking up, and Ruffy says, Andy says, oh, I didn't know you were here. He says, I played that in our World Cup since you've been in here.
Oh, listen.
He just laughs, and Marianne was like, she says, that was going in slagging him. That's what he done. He didn't want.
No, he didn't want everybody.
He had to laugh because he knew what was happening.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'm so glad you told that story there. That's phenomenal. That's absolutely brilliant.
Great.
Right, before we go any further, we've got to give a massive shout out to our sponsors, Glenwood. Proper lifesavers, these guys.
Yeah, Glenwood are the business-to-business debt recovery experts. You've already mentioned your own experiences in business, Frank, with people not paying you money.
Plenty of experience, mate. But if I had Glenwood in those days, I might still have a business.
Well, that's what they do. And in fact, not only are Glenwood consistent and reliable with their services, but they're also top guys outside of their work as well. And with that in mind, we've got something really special lined up, especially for golf fans. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast and also follow Glenwood and LinkedIn and make sure you don't miss it. And all shall be revealed soon. A big surprise for golf fans.
Yeah, I love my golf, Sarah, you know that. But if you do the work, you should get paid. Glenwood make that happen. Simple as that.
So if you want to get paid faster, get in touch at glenwoodconstruction.co.uk.
And remember, tell them Frank sent you.